All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sergeant First Class Aaron McEvers, 2nd Brigade EOA. To my left is Sergeant First Class Smith, the Brigade Sharp, and I've got Chaplain Godding, who is our Brigade Chaplain currently, as well as all of you representing your different organizations, 1-1, 427, 137, and 47 BSB. Thank you for coming. This is going to be what we now refer to as day 0 of Train the Trainer for Foundational Readiness Day. Now, my expected outcome of once you leave here is we have a shared understanding of how you will use the materials that we are going to provide you to make sure training occurs at that squad leader and below level with the rigor that we intend for it to be conducted. So what I've chosen for this month's Foundational Readiness Day, and again, as I said earlier, I think the Army does a great job in speaking about how we're a values-based organization that operates both morally and ethically, and implied in that is that we are all empowered to speak out when we see wrong. And I don't want to wrap around the semantics of wrong too much, but if we're talking about violation of policy, criminal acts, professional ethics that aren't being adhered to, personal moral immorality, anything that negatively affects our organization, we want everyone in the organization to have the ability and the confidence in they're going to be able to say something without cost to themselves. So my thesis of the video initially was there are a list of reasons why soldiers and leaders in our organization don't speak up when they feel something wrong is happening. This isn't exhaustive or conclusive, but what I came up with was bystander effect and diffusion of responsibility. For your understanding and the understanding of others, kind of what that relates to as a scientific, social science, and psychological concept is counterintuitively, when you have a group of people who are witness to a situation, be it sexual harassment, hazing, bullying, abuse of any type, the more people that are present, sometimes the less likely it is that someone is going to intervene and stop it and make sure it's corrected. And part of the reason is that responsibility gets diffused, meaning I may internally rationalize why it's not me that needs to speak out. Well, I'm just a sergeant first class, and there's all these command sergeants major that are witnessing this. It's their job, okay? And that's kind of the process where we're able to rationalize why it's not up to us, which is kind of a logical fallacy, okay? If you see something, you need to understand that it is your job. If you truly are caring or demonstrating the level of care for your peers and this organization that you should feel like it is your responsibility to speak up and speak out, okay? Does anybody have any questions about bystander effect or diffusion of responsibility? I could link bring some research into the fold where it actually saw intervention rates went up with the fewer people present in a given situation. And so that's why sometimes when there's a group of people, we all just kind of look around and you think, oh, it's going to be somebody else. And that kind of ties into pluralistic ignorance. And I'll give it to Sergeant Smith to kind of cover pluralistic ignorance.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So basically, when Sergeant McEvers goes over pluralistic ignorance, it basically encompasses the general consensus or the norm that somebody is acceptable to inappropriate or toxic behavior. Meaning, one example can be if I come into work today, he's at work, we're playing around, we're doing having inappropriate conversations. Somebody new, like Sergeant First Class Fredericks, comes in, sees the organization. She doesn't feel comfortable with what she sees, but everybody else seems to be okay with it, so she goes along as an acceptable norm. That's something that we definitely have to break within every organization, because we get new soldiers that come in, some 19, 18, and they think that this is what the Army is. And we as leaders have to show them different. But actions speak louder than words, so we have to really get in the midst of the ranks to really invoke change. And that happens at every echelon. It's just not at the command sergeant major and battalion commander level. It needs to start from E1 all the way up. And And I'm kind of glad that we're doing Foundation of Readiness Days because we really get to dive into the culture and help change those social norms that soldiers see every day. And that's the only way it's going to change. It starts with a small internal family, and then we could plant those seeds in everybody else and spread that throughout the Army and making our organizations a better place to work in and be productive in. Everybody has to feel important that they're a contributing member to the team. If the soldiers feel like that, they will do 100-fold for you. But if we micromanage, if we always delegate, if we take their power away from them, they're only gonna do what they're told and feel like they're not fully collectively part of the team.
And to add to what you were saying in the example of Sergeant Friedrichs, I think I called you Sergeant Richardson earlier, did I? I apologize. In that pluralistic ignorance scenario, she feels, I can't believe I'm the only one that feels like this isn't wrong. Okay, and what she's also doing is she's looking at everyone else. She's taking behavioral cues and referencing them. And sometimes everybody just tries to play it cool, like, yeah, nothing to see here, I don't, when in reality, and unbeknownst to her, other people are having that same internal dialogue. And they're thinking, I can't believe this is happening, I can't believe everybody's okay with this. And we're looking at each other and we're like, oh, everybody seems cool, calm, and collected. I guess I'm the only one that feels this way. And that's another contributing factor to interventions not being made. Another thing we can talk about is cultural norms. It's the culture kind of sets the conditions, the culture of your organization. Do you have a culture where it is not only tolerated, but encouraged, even reinforced? Are we acknowledging the courage some soldiers display when they come forward? Okay, even if they don't interpret the situation properly, but they're as truthful as they can be about a situation. Even if they're not right, are we saying, I want to thank you for you bringing this to my attention? Okay, it shows great courage on your behalf. Are we doing that? Or are we just being like, hey, you got it wrong, pal. Move on down the road, go sweep the line in the motor pool. Okay? There's a distinct difference in those two cultures. And it impacts whether or not the interventions are going to be made. Does anybody else have anything to say about culture?
Well, when you touch on culture, something I always hear, because we've been in the military for a while, right? Well, I grew up in the old Army. Well, I'm tired of hearing that because we're in today's Army, so we have to adapt and go along and help the service member cope. They're not going to experience things we've experienced, but we got to set a good glide path and footprint for them to follow, so they can then in turn teach the future generations of the Army. So we got to leave the organization better than where we left it, right? And the only way to do it is to show them something different instead of going, oh, well, let's go back to what we used to do, or let's go back to old way of doing things. That's the wrong answer. We got to think outside the box as leaders and really challenge ourselves to be productive for that service member and help them see a different path. To enjoy being in the Army and to think of new things, and it's okay to take certain risks. That's going to help the organization be better in the long run.
Absolutely. And probably the next thing is ambiguous situation, or situational ambiguity. Okay, the more ambiguous a situation, the less likely it is that somebody's going to intervene. All right, and a good kind of a crude example would be, you all would know it was wrong if I walked over there and I socked the chaplain one. I'd never do it because he's an amazing, phenomenal person. Okay, however, and we could all agree that's wrong. You should not do that. However, maybe I say some comments that might be a little bit harmful, that are wrapped inside of a joke, about his religious preference or his role as a chaplain. Maybe I tell a little anti-religion joke. And you might think, haha, okay, good icebreaker, but it may be very psychologically harmful to his identity and who he is within the organization. That's kind of what I mean by an ambiguous situation. I'm sure our soldiers, particularly when alcohol is involved, and this is where I may defer to my sharp reps because we talk about it, those situations in social settings, in bars, okay, I really see this guy or gal is paying a lot of attention to this other guy or gal, giving them a lot of drinks. Is this what I think it is? Okay, and if we're confused, if it's ambiguous, we're less likely to intervene. And it's precisely those ambiguous situations that, uncorrected, can become the next sexual assault, or the next assault, or the next act of criminality within our organization. Okay? Does anybody have any questions or discussion they want to add about situational ambiguity? All right. Another one, and I'm gonna defer to you, Sergeant, because you brought it up. You talked about retaliation and reprisal.
I did. So I also talked about how, there's a stigma or some type of label that goes along with that. So we do have reprisal plans, but that doesn't, change the stigma that a soldier might carry or how their peers look at them. Other soldiers might feel like they have to walk on water when they're around that soldier, or like, I guess walking on eggshells, be careful, watch their every move when they're around a soldier that has reported before, or not want to be around that soldier because they're then, fearful of what might come out of that situation.
They get labeled a what?
A snitch.
A snitch, exactly. They get the snitch label, and it's kind of a reversed relationship. I'm not concerned about behaving properly. I'm concerned that the snitch will report my improper behavior. And that's kind of backwards. We should concern ourselves with, I approve of my own conduct because it is right and it is aligned with the unit's and the interest of the unit, as opposed to, I'm not proud of my conduct, I probably shouldn't be doing this, and I need to make sure I don't do it in front of this individual, in front of Sergeant Gamble, because Sergeant Gamble gonna snitch. And that's absolutely, as leaders, we see it. I've heard of it happening at the squad level and below. As leaders, we need to absolutely crush that, okay? Don't concern yourself with what the snitch sees. Concern yourself with your own conduct, and make sure it's appropriate. And I think that's gonna solve our problems. But, yeah, it's much easier to deride the snitch than it is to moderate your own behavior. And that's unfortunate. And then we talked about cost of status. If I'm newer to the organization and I'm lower in status in the hierarchy, and I'm gonna attempt to speak out against somebody that's higher in status, higher in rank, higher in the hierarchy, it's a much lesser chance that I'm gonna speak up, okay? Because I'm already concerned about my status within the organization. And the last thing I don't want you to suffer. And this may be accompanied by some internal tension. I don't want my peer to suffer because he's getting bullied by our first line, but at the same time, me first. I'm concerned about my status. And if I speak up and tell him, hey Sergeant, I don't think you should do that, he might be, well, like, I guess you don't want to go to the board next month. And those are the that goes back into the retaliation and reprisal, that again, as leaders, we absolutely can have zero tolerance for it, all right? And then we talked about trust. You wanna talk about trust within the organization?
So basically, my experience coming up, trust is very important. I think it's an important thing to move forward, especially dealing with soldiers. If you don't have trust, your soldiers will not do anything for you. They don't feel comfortable telling you about their family, their personal upbringing, or anything, because they feel the sincerity is not there, that supervisor doesn't care. When it comes to reporting, if they don't trust going to Sergeant First McEvers, they don't trust coming to me, how can we help the service member in the future? So they internalize it, they contemplate all kinds of things that go on in their head. They resort to substance abuse, they resort to isolationism, they even result in contemplate suicide. But while I touch on those, how do we identify those things of those soldiers? So if the leaders, if the soldiers trust you and you trust them, you should know when your soldiers off key and not doing the normal things. Even soldiers that we may claim to be troublemakers or dirtbags, they're individuals in too. So we still can't turn our backs on them, even though they've been doing some kind of wrongdoing. It's important that we have to pay everybody attention to, because they're just as much as important to the team as we are. And we can't do any mission without any soldiers. You know what I'm saying? So if they don't feel like they're a part of the team, you'll be in for a long haul.
Yep, absolutely. Lastly, probably one of the biggest obstacles to a soldier or just a member of this organization speaking up on behalf of themselves or others when they see something wrong is self-efficacy. And what self-efficacy is, that belief in whether or not you are capable of doing something, okay? If I see these two chaplains here are absolutely not doing the right thing, and I'm convinced that they need to be kind of corrected, or they need to receive the message I'm about to send them. If I do not believe that I'm capable of doing a good job at it, I'm not gonna do it. And that's what self-efficacy means. And it's basically confidence. Are you confident that you are able to effectively communicate the message that needs to be corrected? And that ties into the skill that Marcus Hawkins, the R2 specialist, teaches, and he runs through it very briefly. But I think it's simple and it's elegant when he's talking about assertive communication in the ideal model. Again, we'll follow that up with more product, which should enable soldiers to practice the skill and get a good understanding of what we're talking about, what we're expecting. I think how I envision the Foundational Readiness Day training going is the video that I've prepared. The video we're creating right now is going to be for our fellow trainers, okay, our subordinate trainers. The video I prepared is for those squad leaders and below to sit down with their soldiers, watch it, and have an honest discussion about not only the concepts we talk about, but the dynamics of that squad, that leader-led relationship. What's that culture within that squad? What's that culture within the company? All that needs to be discussed, and we need to generate a higher level of awareness. We probably need to ask our leaders to elevate their maturity somewhat. And what I mean by that is they need to be that leader that can handle that bad news, okay? And that requires a very mature response. When somebody's telling you something that you particularly don't want to hear, either because maybe it's some negative feedback about you or your performance or leader, or about the organization. If you all have any feedback, I will open the floor now if there's any discussions you want to have about how we're going to proceed moving forward. I did that good of a job? We're that awesome as trainers? Okay.